I'm Emma Sutherland, clinical naturopath, author, mum, and your host. With over 20 years in clinical practice, I've helped thousands of women and their families transform their health using evidence-based integrative strategies. I am deeply passionate about making science simple and actionable so that you feel confident and empowered in your health decisions. This channel is your go-to for trusted insights, expert conversations, and practical tools that support your real-life wellness. Welcome to our two-part deep dive into the biological drivers and nutritional interventions in autism spectrum disorder, featuring naturopath Lynn Joels. In this series, we'll explore the fascinating and multifaceted connections between early nutritional factors, the gut-brain axis, neuroinflammation, and environmental toxins, as well as how these shape brain development and brain function. In part one, Lynn unraveled the mechanisms from prenatal nutrition to immune dysregulation, microbiome disruption, and toxin exposures that contribute to ASD pathways. In part two, we'll shift focus to practical dietary and therapeutic strategies, examining the roles of gluten, dairy, preservatives, and nutritional treatments in supporting brain health and behavioural outcomes. If you missed part one of this popular series where Lynn discussed the mechanisms that drive autism, I would highly recommend watching that video first. Lynn, welcome back. Thanks for joining us again.
Hi, lovely to be here, part two.
Yeah, super excited. Now, let's hit the ground running. I have a lot of parents that come in and they're like, oh, we've just moved to gluten-free and dairy-free and we've done this and we've done that. But what is the actual evidence around a gluten or casein-free diet? And which children may get the most benefits from this? What do you think?
Yeah, really awesome question to kick off with, I think. As we mentioned in part one, it's super important for us to have a healthy bidirectional communication going on between the gut and the brain. And we know that our gut is leading that to give us the optimal brain function. So a gluten-free and casein-free, or gluten-free and dairy-free, as it's usually more referred to, casein just being one of the proteins that's in milk, lactose being the other one, is probably the most widely implemented dietary intervention with ASD. There is a lot of science behind it. But the cool thing, gives me another chance to get into some biochemistry, is the theory behind it is what's called the opioid excess theory.
Okay.
Simply put, gluten and casein, so as we mentioned, one of the proteins in milk, are dietary derived opioid peptides. Now, you don't need to worry about that too much, but suffice to say, they're not particularly friendly. And what they're doing is inducing gut dysbiosis, increasing intestinal permeability, and allowing what I like to call the wrong bacteria to kind of roam around, wreaking havoc. So again, they're inflammatory. So if we've got a sensitive or an inflamed gut, as we mentioned, the risk of gut infections in ASD is fourfold higher. We've got this increased inflammation, and then alongside that, we often get a gluten-free and a dairy-free sensitivity. And as I always like to say to parents, there's probably the two key most inflammatory foods in a Western diet are dairy and gluten. We are the only mammal that goes on to drink and consume another mammal's milk.
Yeah, it's kind of weird, right?
It's kind of weird. I had a kid then say to me the other day, yeah, ducks don't then drink our milk. They like process of a little brain. I'm like, no, that's kind of my point. So this, I guess, this vulnerability leads us to this opioid-induced inflammation, and that goes on to impair central nervous system function. So again, back to this inflammatory gut picture, inflammatory brain picture. The kids that are going to benefit the most, I almost want to say all, if not most. Anybody that's presenting with any amount of gut inflammation, any behavioral issues, any GI comorbidities. So again, when there's any of those infections going on or any constipation kind of stuff. But again, it is always context dependent. And again, it's working with a family. I'm not a naturopath that breezes on in stripping food groups in a world, especially if we also know that child is currently nutrient deficient. So again, we just have to kind of prioritize, and it could be that we take one of them out and then we take another one out. And there's always a lot of hand holding goes on with parents when they say, no cheese. Yeah, no cheese.
I just often hear from parents that they see some quite profound changes just through going gluten-free and dairy-free, they notice and they get third party, like the OT will start saying to them, "Oh, have you changed anything?" Or the teacher. So it's actually quite profound how much of a difference just that alone can make. But what about other dietary strategies? Things like low FODMAP. How do you see that being relevant with ASD? Is it relevant? Is it not relevant? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, it can be relevant. Pull that apart a little bit. So FODMAPs, I guess, simply put, are types of carbohydrates that are poorly absorbed. For those that are interested, it's the fermentable oligo monosaccharides and polyols, but I don't think we'll bother referring to it as such moving forward. There's quite a lot of evidence coming through that removing them or limiting them can alleviate a lot of GI distress, bloating, pain, potential inflammation. And as we know, taking away any amount of pain and bloating in a child is almost instantaneously going to improve some behavior, irrespective of what's going on at a biochemical level. Yeah, there's some science that are showing significant improvements in GI health and behavioral metrics,
Okay.
specifically hyperactivity in the compliance piece, which again, we've talked about the compliance piece being, is it behavior or is it nutrition driven? And I guess the why behind it, or the mode of action behind it, is again, it's this reduction of inflammation. It's the chance to restore the mucous membrane, which gives us a chance to get some nutrients into a kid, or the chance to just begin to turn down some of that biochemical inflammation, brain inflammation going on. And as I mentioned, it's like we all know how feral we can be as adults when we're in pain and we've got discomfort. And we're suddenly sitting with kids that don't have the words or the emotional maturity to articulate a lot of that, who are sitting in pain, no criticism to parents, because kids have a way, very good way of masking it, but more importantly, they don't have the words when they're little. And again, so it's there, but it's unknown that it's there. Yeah, and again, as I mentioned before, it's like there's obviously a nutritional concern or a parental concern with removing food groups from kids' diets, but we work with the child. There's a lot of guidance given. We ensure that we're supplementing. We ensure your kids are getting the key nutrition they need. We monitor weight very closely. And yeah, we just make it accessible. As I always say, adherence is the only intervention, right?
Very true. Very well said, actually. Wonder what the current evidence is for things like probiotics, prebiotics. I mean, this is a field that as naturopaths, this is our world. But for people who it's not their world, where is the evidence on these kind of interventions?
There is a bucket load when it comes to probiotics, for sure. There's a lot of research. Efficacy is very strain specific. Like I think we mentioned in part one, a lot of it's about the ratios of bacteria. Again, to your point of sometimes causing more harm than good, it's like just shoving down the species probiotic into a kid. It can, if there's other gut issues going on, inflame things, not make them worse. They seem to work incredibly well with the right diet to reduce GI distress. There's a lot of evidence out there saying that they support serotonin levels, which is one of our happy neurotransmitters, which is produced 96%, I think, is produced in the gut, which I just think is so super cool.
Yeah.
Obviously, they're improving diversity and thereby a lot of that GI symptomatology and severity of some of the ASD sort of symptom stuff is going away. And then, yeah, and there's always been a lot of research, kind of anxiety, depression, which again are often friends of all our little kiddies that have got a lot of autism pictures kind of going on. And I'm going to share one very geeky science moment with you because I just loved this when I came across it quite recently, which is a study they've done with probiotics in preschoolers.
Okay.
Now, they know in ASD that we have altered GABA. Now, GABA, again, is another one of our neurotransmitters. And this group of preschoolers, they introduced probiotics, and I won't delve into all the specific strains, but it was a specific strain probiotic. And they showed direct improvements on GABA signaling in the brain, which I'm like, if only it was always that easy, but it just shows us how empowered we are to do something about this stuff in what is, as probiotics, an easy option. Yes, there's many strains and mixes, which helps you and I. But as I would always say, go cautiously with parents about throwing in a lot of probiotics if there are gut comorbidities going on, because you can often rock the boat in the wrong direction.
Yeah.
Prebiotics, we get a lot in our diets, right? I think people kind of forget that we eat a lot of this stuff. Improving, huge amount of improvement in microbial biodiversity. So their prebiotics promote the good and suppress the bad guys. So again, improving some of that GI symptomatology that's out there. We know when they're combined with exclusion diets that they often work really well. And as I said, we get a lot in our diet. So it's our leeks, our garlics, our onions, some of our fruits, our apples, bananas. And they are things that can be supplemented easily. And in the supplement world, they're either tasteless or they taste totally delicious because they're made of things like kiwi fruit. So when
Yes.
it comes to getting them down a child, there's never a problem with your prebiotics. And I think this is I'm gonna throw in with the opportunity here to potentially talk about stuff on the horizon. And I'm gonna
Yeah.
professionally call it microbiome transplantation, but also say any opportunity to talk about poo transplants.
Still,
Many people are sitting there going, ew, which again is a bit icky, right? Still a very novel intervention, but what's really exciting about some of the early clinical investigation is the really positive impact that it's having on core ASD symptoms, anxiety, GI distress. And because obviously what it's doing is putting in really healthy diversity into the
yes.
diet. And obviously that diversity is reducing neuroinflammation, bringing neurotransmitters back online, normalizing stress responses. And it's all about that healthy diversity. So, yes, not regulatory approved yet, not something I can pop in a capsule for you. But again, exciting in my regard that there's something else on the horizon that could have such a positive difference on these children.
Yeah, I think that's remarkable. And we've seen the research for fecal microbial transplants for other conditions seeming to work very well. There was recent research on bipolar, obviously Clostridium difficile, a bacterial infection. So this is an emerging science that we're learning more about, but really interesting to think where that could be in 5 years' time also, isn't it?
Absolutely. Yeah, it's exciting.
And then there's this process called methylation that comes up again and again when it comes to autism. So, first of all, what is it? And then how do we support this process of methylation?
It is a very common word these days, which I guess it's kind of good that I always say complex science gets out into the mainstream, but I think it came around through two special genes that everybody was kind of getting tested. So, simply put, methylation acts as a switch to control the activation or deactivation of genes, proteins, metabolic pathways. It's probably simple to say it's involved in pretty much every single bodily function. Some of the key ones being gene regulation, really important, obviously, early on because it's involved in embryonic development. It's involved in hormone production, detoxification, energy. So, it has a big role in the body. And the role of it in ASD is one of supporting gene expression through brain development. So, via this, again, it's been hypothesized that it's loosely one of the causes of ASD. That's methylation, very simply put. It's a very complex area. So, I guess with research showing us that there's altered DNA methylation patterns in the brains of ASD children. So that's something they can actually test. And these epigenetic alterations can be things like genetic mutations. So again, they're kind of hereditary or interactions with the environment. So again, it's that epigenetic picture, or simply put, the switching on and switching off of genes by what you're putting into your world. And either one leading to, I guess, a different way that our genes are regulating, and that can contribute to ASD risk and ASD severity of symptoms.
I was just going to say, it's easy for parents to buy anything online as a supplement these days. And I always caution in this space of methylation that the forms of the vitamins, the type of the vitamins can really make things go pear shaped. So, what do you caveat? Any caveats in that space? How do you work in this way?
Yeah, it's probably one of the areas with the biggest caveat, which is if you're not sure, don't.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I know it's like all parents come at this from a place of love, but it's an area where you can literally throw the wheels off really quickly. Yes, we need the key nutrients that act as what we call cofactors with methylation. I always like to say to parents, it's almost like there's a little central wheel that's a methylation wheel, and it needs all of these little cofactors to turn efficiently that impact all of the areas that we've mentioned that methylation works on. And yes, some of those are things like folate, which we've spoken about alongside all of the other B vitamins. Again, may have heard of the activated form of a lot of these vitamins. It is things like zinc and choline, which again, we're getting in our diets. But it is very easy to knock the wheels off super quickly with methylation pathways, especially again in our genetically susceptible kids, if they're under methylators again. So I go in super, super cautiously, very gently, I drop dose, which I know you work that way too, Emma. It's like the low doses of things, and it can be a drop of B12 every third day. It can be a quarter of a capsule of one of the B vitamins. And it's, again, just slowly. And some of it can also be seeing how the child reacts. But again, it can be, much as it's a vitally important component, it often has to be something that we address after we've begun to get a few other things moving, especially the gut, the detox pathways, some of the nutrient absorption, before we can start working on this. So it isn't something I would probably start from the get-go, because there's too many sensitivities kind of going on for these kids. And again, it's turning down some of that noise so we can gain traction in the right order with the right things.
And it reflects back to part one of our discussion on ASD about how the order of treating things is really critical, and you need a very trained eye in order to work out what to treat first in that way. What about vitamin D? What does the research say? And then what do you see clinically in relation to vitamin D and ASD?
Yeah, so I think we mentioned briefly in part one the importance of vitamin D in utero. So it was that hormone that was involved in bone formation, obviously regulation of CNS. Then in early life, it has a continued role of neuro and cognitive development. It also plays a really important role in the modulation of the inflammatory system. And we obviously have seen the huge inflammatory states that are presenting in autistic kids. Low vitamin D is found to be very strongly correlated with the severity of ASD symptoms. And this has come out of studies in parts of the world where UVB light is a lot lower, and the severity of symptoms in autistic children that get less sunlight in the year, which again is fascinating. Yeah, so if it's low, we can often find things like serotonin levels are reduced. And we know serotonin helps regulate brain function. It's one of our feel-good neurotransmitters. And it specifically helps promote areas of the brain for things like social behavior and emotional cues. So again, all of these like little things that hopefully are beginning to join up this complex puzzle for everybody. We know it plays a role in oxidative stress, which again, we talked about in part one. But we also know through the research that the earlier that we supplement, the better, because it has such a big impact on neural pathways. And we know that obviously kids are just laying all of those neural pathways down so fast in early life that, again, the earlier we can supplement, the better. It's something that's easily tested. So again, in a blood test, I know it's like cutoffs are often about, I think about 50 in Australia, but it's naturopaths, if it's not upwards of 100, we see that as a deficiency. And it's super easy to supplement and age dependent, but it's, again, it's with drops and sprays and other bits and pieces. It's an easy one. It's an easy one to supplement.
Really good insight there. And just the power of getting your child outside, running around in the sun, all of those benefits can be really supported in that way. Now, we spoke briefly about chemical loads in our first discussion, and you went into that. What I think would be great is just to discuss, are there any practical steps that parent can take to minimize their toxin exposure, either through their diet or through changes within the house? I'd really love to give people a bit of an action list of what they can do.
Yeah, and this is an area that I always go, it's some of the smallest, simplest things that can have the biggest impact. I always say to parents, think of your life from a perspective of living simply. So, you know, it's like you can cut down on processed foods, you can stop using kind of canned things, fill your house with fresh air, use natural materials and natural fibers, limit medication, all of that kind of simple stuff. Buy organic when you can. It really does have a significant difference when it comes to chemical exposure. I think there's some websites that talk about the EWGs, things like the Dirty Dozen and the Clean 15. So if you're prioritizing things that you're going to buy organic or non-organic, this website's a really useful one to use. Know where your foods come from. I am just eternally blessed here in WA that I don't think we have anything that we need to get interstate or even outside of the country. We have an abundance of everything we need here in WA. If you can buy from your local farmer's market, you can talk to them about where things are grown, what they're sprayed with. Eat seasonally. Our bodies need us to do that as much as the environment needs us to do that. Reduce personal care products and always look out for things like SLSs, parabens. Think natural, and just bear in mind that organic doesn't mean natural. I think it's important. Personal care products. Minimize household cleaners. This is always a funny one. I'm like, you don't need 15 bottles of something under your bathroom or kitchen sink, one or two is probably all you need. Bicarb lemon juice and vinegar in various combinations have a profound effect on pretty much the entire house. Avoid garden pesticides, either learn to live with the little bugs or get rid of them naturally. We are here to coexist with nature. Ditch artificial fragrances, stop burning your can.
Yeah.
Get away from plastics. We touched on that briefly. If you're going to use plastics, ensure they're BPA free.
Yeah.
Don't cling wrap, use beeswax wraps, use glass, use metal containers if it's your kids' little bento boxes for lunch boxes and things like that. Avoid toxic cookware. So I always say try steel, ceramic, and kind of stuff. And drink filtered water. Here again, sitting in Fremantle with, I think, the worst tasting water in the universe. Filtered water is just a must. There are some really simple ways of doing that. You can walk into Bunnings and walk out with a $250 simple to install under sink, gives you filtered, versus going up to thousands to bring it into the entire house. And obviously water is going onto our skin through showers and baths. So again, a shower is more healthy than sitting in a bath and stewing in the water if it's full of chemicals. Yeah, so a number of things that I like to say are kind of accessible, not too expensive, and quite easy to implement that'll have a huge impact on your family.
And I always recommend just layer them in. Finish off something, just don't rebuy it, and just layer them in. And around the water filter, I am really big on that because I always say if you don't have a filter, you are the filter. So
Very
water
well
is super important on that front. Because you're a functional naturopath, obviously you use lab testing like microbiome panels or whatever you use to really help get strategic and tailor those dietary and say detox interventions for kids. Which ones do you like to use and how would you say that they are beneficial? So for the parents that are watching, like how is that beneficial to you and the child?
Yeah, for sure. I use it very much alongside a very comprehensive history, which I think for those
Yeah.
of you that have listened to part one, I need to understand the child, the environment. And I even need to understand that to know which functional test to even throw into a conversation because it has to be accessible and it can't cause inordinate amounts of stress for parents if I'm asking them to do things that their child's just not up to. But as I said, then it's a case of needing an understanding. And I would love to have little X-ray eyes that could just see into every child to tell me there were little parasites and where all the little biochemical issues were.
Yeah.
I don't. So there are some really beautiful tests out there. Yes, I do use blood testing. Yes, it's invasive. Here in WA, specifically, Saturn pathology are just amazing. They will come out to your house. They will bring virtual reality goggles, they numb arms, they are sensational, and it gives me a lot of information really quickly with regards to nutrient status, but even just general inflammatory markers. It gives us basic sort of environmental allergen pictures as well, which is kind of really cool. I do a lot of microbiome testing, so that I get a lot of constipated kiddies in my clinic. I always like to know why. Again, we can go quite simple and just do basic parasitology stuff right the way through to comprehensive microbiome if we need it. But the test I always like to say to parents is probably the most value for money because all of this functional testing prefaced with it's not covered on your health insurance or Medicare, it's all out of pocket expenses. The one that gives me the most information and therefore, I guess, fast tracks a lot of treatment for me is an organic acid test or an oats test, as you'll hopefully hear it called. This gives me over 70 biomarkers throughout the body, so nutritional, microbiome, how energy production is happening, how your kid's detoxifying, have they got protein malabsorption issues? And then really important here, it gives me neurotransmitter markers. It gives me ratios of how your kid's body is processing those neurotransmitters. So again, as I said, I work with the family with regards to going, what's the easiest, what's the most accessible? The cool thing about the oats test is a urine test.
Yeah.
The least invasive and the easiest to catch. There are ways of catching it if your kid's in a nappy. So again, probably the easiest one to do.
Yeah, I would agree. It's quite incredible the amount of information that can come from that one test. And I guess as naturopaths, we have this profound belief as part of our philosophy that no two children are the same. Each and every child needs that very individualized protocol. So you clinically, what guides that decision making in each case?
Yeah, and I think that sort of sets us apart as well as practitioners. For me, it's history plus test results plus, in capital letters, family environment and what is accessible and possible for that family and child to achieve. it is always very individualized, from the compounding of supplement blends, which I do a lot, the diet that can be introduced or not, the environment that they're living in, getting circadian rhythms back on track, sleep cycles, looking at somatic therapies, and broader support. I guess for me, it's always very mind, body, spirit. It's never just straight in with something very biochemical. I always bring in other specialists and practitioners. I work very closely with both the chiro and the kinesiologist in the clinic where I am based, and we get some beautiful results with that. But I also then work and have a network of OTs, speechies, behavioral therapists, music therapists. Again, it's always that multidisciplinary approach with the child being at the center. So it could be that they start with me, but then they go off to do some other things. They might come back to me a little bit later when they're ready for certain treatments in a certain order. And going back to your point, Emma, a lot of it is the order of which we tackle a lot of these things for these children. Always aiming for some easy wins.
Yes.
I think we started this whole conversation with, it's like these families are desperate and they're in the dark and so much misinformation. They just need help.
Yeah.
And again, I don't want to make it harder. So we go for some easy wins. And again, that's very family, child specific, but a lot of the time it is getting them pooping a little better. Some of these kind of simple things, which can hopefully mean families might get 4 or 5 hours sleep a night, all of them, rather than just some of them, and turn down just some of that noise that we've talked about a few times.
Yeah. Beautiful lens that you are treating through. It's very individualized, but it's also very compassionate, which I think this space really needs, is that level of compassion and individualization, and working in that collaborative way with other health professionals is super important as well. For ASD to have that support network underneath the family is absolutely critical.
Yeah, for sure. It's super important.
Now, Lynn, we have talked about a lot in our part one, part two, and I'm sure the audience is going to say, bring Lynn back. We want more Lynn. But before we finish up, are there any last minute words or myths that you want to bust, or anything you want to share with us and our viewers?
Yeah, for sure. I think it's, I'd like to finish with a note of encouragement. As I said,
Yeah.
it's like these families are having it tough. And I know you could say that across the board, but it's really hard orchestrating all that's involved with a child with ASD. And respectfully to the medical profession, families are often handed an ASD diagnosis and it's like, it's been great later. And they're a
Yeah.
little bit all over the shop. So you're doing a great job. Whatever it is you're doing, it's a great job. Always ask for help. As we've mentioned, there's a lot out there. And if you don't know where to start, just start somewhere. A lot of us, in whatever role we're in, being an OT or myself, we will signpost you to other places for other support. We have networks. So just start somewhere. And I guess it's also just back to reminding parents and carers that science is evolving fast. We've spoken about a lot of it. We're here to filter and sieve through a lot of the false science as well. The more that is being studied, the more that I'm learning, the more that you're learning, the more that becomes available. Obviously, the more we can keep offering, the more support that we can do. So, yeah, I'd just like to really thank you, Emma. Love spending time with you talking about what is a really, really important subject and very passionate, as you can tell for me. Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Absolute pleasure, Lynn. Thank you for joining us. And I really appreciate all your insights. I'm sure we'll have you back.
Look forward to it. Thanks, Emma.
Thanks for being with me today. Don't forget to like the video and hit that subscribe button. Check out the links in the show notes for more health empowering information. And please ask me any questions in the comments below.